The first words that tore through the cabin came from the cockpit door slamming open, followed by Captain Randall Pierce's voice dripping with contempt. "What now? Some little airport charity case thinks she knows airplanes better than me?" Every head turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. The insult cracked through the rows like a slap. Captain Pierce, tall, broad-shouldered, with graying hair slicked back and a face carved into permanent superiority, stormed down the aisle. His uniform was pristine, his ego even more polished. He walked like he owned not only the plane, but the sky itself. The aircraft jolted violently. Overhead screens flickered, then died. Flight attendant Rafael Rafe Moreno, gripping a seat for balance, tried to calm passengers as whispers filled the air. Another attendant, Lena Hart, younger and more attentive, exchanged a worried look with Rafe. But Pierce wasn't focused on the malfunction. He was focused on humiliating a child. "Where is she?" he barked, scanning the rows. "Who told you to interrupt me with that nonsense? A 12-year-old trying to diagnose my aircraft?" Some passengers chuckled nervously. Others frowned. In seat 27A, Amara Cole flinched, but didn't avert her gaze from the flickering cabin lights. Her warm brown skin glowed faintly under the dying bulbs. She was small, wearing an oversized blue hoodie, her natural curls tied in a soft puff. On her lap rested her treasure, a notebook full of hand-sketched avionics diagrams. Beside her, her mother, Amara Cole, whispered, "Ignore him, baby. You didn't do anything wrong." But Amara wasn't listening to the insults. She was listening to the airplane. The flickering lights weren't random. They pulsed in a sequence she recognized. 3 short flickers. Pause, 2 long, 1 short. A telltale sign of an incomplete avionics loop reset. Something she had studied from old manuals and technical PDFs she devoured late at night. Passengers across the aisle murmured anxiously. A baby cried in row 25. Someone pressed a call button repeatedly. A half-working chime crackled overhead, distorted, glitching. The turbulence deepened. Lena Hart hurried down the aisle, her eyes darting between the dead screens and the pale faces of frightened passengers. Captain Pierce reached row 27 and stopped, looming over Amara as if she had personally attacked his pride. "So you're the little genius causing all this?" Pierce sneered. Maya straightened. "Sir, my daughter was just—" Pierce cut her off with a cold laugh. "Help? People like her need to stay in their seats and stop pretending they understand anything." A few passengers gasped. One whispered sharply, "That's out of line." Amara looked up, meeting Captain Pierce's glare. Her voice was quiet but steady. "Sir, the flickering pattern isn't random. The avionics loop didn't finish resetting after—" Pierce snapped his hand up in her face. "Stop! Just stop!" He scoffed cruelly. "I've logged more flight hours than you've seen birthdays. I don't need some kid from row 20 whatever teaching me about my aircraft." Someone laughed too loudly. Another passenger, Daniel Briggs, seat 28C, raised his phone discreetly and began recording. Pierce leaned closer, lowering his voice, but making sure everyone could hear. "Next time you want attention, draw a picture. Leave the flying to the adults." Maya pulled Amara protectively closer, fury burning in her chest. But Amara's eyes stayed on the lights, not on Pierce, not on the people laughing. The cabin lights flickered again, the same exact sequence. Passengers gasped. Someone cried out, "Why aren't the screens working? What's going on?" Lena Hart hurried to Pierce's side, whispering urgently, "Captain, we're getting contradictory signals." Pierce snapped at her. "It's a sensor misread. Don't stir up panic." But Amara murmured, almost to herself, "It's not a misread. It's the loop." Pierce heard her. His irritation twisted into mock amusement, then into pure, sharp cruelty. He straightened his jacket, raised his voice theatrically, and addressed the entire cabin. "All right, everyone, listen up." He pointed at Amara, his smile dripping arrogance. "If this kid can fix the airplane, I will give her $100 million. A wave of laughter crashed across the passengers, dismissive, cruel, deafening. Amara didn't look at the captain. She didn't look at the people laughing. She looked at the lights, the rhythm, the pattern. On the page in her notebook was the exact circuit reset sequence she knew the crew had overlooked. Outside, storm clouds gathered. The turbulence worsened. Fear swallowed the laughter. Rafe Moreno grabbed the intercom, voice shaking. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated." But everyone could feel it. Something was wrong, seriously wrong. And somewhere deep inside the buzzing, flickering belly of the aircraft, a 12-year-old black girl already knew what the captain refused to see. The turbulence didn't let up. It pressed down like an invisible hand shaking the metal bones of the aircraft. Overhead, bins rattled. A faint metallic creak echoed through the cabin, causing several passengers to grip their armrests. In seat 27A, Amara Cole tightened her seatbelt. She kept rereading the same diagram in her notebook, a hand-sketched map of the avionics feedback loop. Her pencil tapped the margin in a steady rhythm, matching the flickering lights overhead. Across the aisle, Daniel Briggs lowered his phone for a moment. He leaned forward to the elderly woman in 26C, Mrs. Evelyn Booker, voice trembling. "Do you think something's actually wrong, ma'am?" Mrs. Booker, calm but tense, whispered, "Something's not right up there, and that little girl sees it clearer than any of us." Another hard jolt shook the plane. Flight attendant Rafe Moreno stumbled, bracing himself on a headrest. His eyes darted toward the cockpit, then back to the terrified faces. He swallowed hard. He was trained for emergencies, but not for this kind of chaos. A plane glitching while their own captain was busy mocking a child. Rafe knelt beside a passenger who had started hyperventilating. "It's okay, sir. We're just in some rough weather." But even he didn't believe his own words. At the back of the cabin, Lena Hart stood frozen for a moment, gripping a stack of untouched water cups. She stared up at the flickering lights, watching the exact pattern Amara had described earlier. 3 short, pause, 2 long, 1 short. Her breath caught. It wasn't random. She hurried toward row 27, weaving through trembling passengers. When she reached Amara, she crouched down, her voice gentle but urgent. "Sweetheart, can you show me exactly what you saw?" Amara turned her notebook around. Her fingers shook slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of someone finally asking. "It's the reset loop." It didn't finish. The flickers matched the sequence for a partial failure in the feedback bus. It's not the engine. It's the system feeding bad data to the cockpit. Lena blinked. She wasn't an engineer, but the conviction in Amara's voice cut through her uncertainty like a clean blade. She scanned the notebook. Hand-drawn circuit paths, notes in tiny handwriting, arrows showing cause and effect. You drew all this yourself?" Lena whispered. Amara nodded quietly. "I study airplanes. Every day. I read the maintenance logs online. This is the same pattern the Airbus Tech Forum talked about last year. If they don't reset the loop in the right order, the warnings multiply." Lena felt goosebumps rise along her arms. Maya Cole, clasping her daughter's hand, murmured, "She's been studying aviation since she was 8. She knows this stuff." A soft boom outside, thunder, made the cabin flinch. Lena stood abruptly. "I'll take this to the cockpit." From across the aisle, Daniel Briggs whispered, "Please, someone needs to." But before she could take a step, Captain Randall Pierce reappeared, storming out of the cockpit with the fury of a man whose authority had been questioned twice in one day. "Lena," he snapped. "What are you doing?" Lena straightened. "Captain, I think you need to see this. The glitch pattern." Pierce raised a hand, silencing her. "I told you, it's a sensor misread. I don't need theories from passengers, from kids, or from you." Rafe Moreno approached cautiously. "Captain, the cabin is panicking. We need clearer instructions." Pierce glared. "The only instruction is to do your job and stop feeding into nonsense." He turned his attention back to Amara, giving her a thin, venomous smile. "Still trying to fix my airplane, Miss Cole?" Amara's voice was soft. "I'm not trying to fix it. I'm trying to explain what's wrong." "Well, don't." His voice sharpened, each word a dagger. "I'm not taking advice from a 12-year-old who probably learned the word airplane last Tuesday." Maya stood up abruptly. "You will not talk to my daughter like that." Before Pierce could respond, the plane lurched, violently. Several passengers screamed. A drink cart slid an inch before Rafe caught it. The overhead chimes stuttered again, glitching into a distorted whine. Pierce's face paled for half a second, but it was long enough for Lena to see it. Something was wrong, something he couldn't explain. Amara whispered to herself, matching the flickers. 1, 1, 1. Pause. 2, 1. Repeating. It's getting worse. Lena took a breath, stepped forward, and held out Amara's notebook toward the captain. "Sir, you have to look. The pattern, the loop, it matches an actual Airbus advisory bulletin. I think she's right." Pierce's jaw clenched, hard. Passengers watched, wide-eyed. Every camera phone was raised now. Mrs. Evelyn Booker spoke, voice steady from seat 26C. "Captain Pierce, you owe that girl the courtesy of listening. For our sake." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the cabin. Pierce froze. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not in front of a plane full of witnesses. His pride warred with the reality unfolding around him. He exhaled sharply, snatching the notebook from Lena's hand. "Fine, I'll humor you. Let's see the childish doodles." But as he stared at the page, his eyes narrowed. Lines of data, circuit paths, precise fault tree logic. Not childish at all. And then, another glitch shuddered through the cabin systems. A warning tone pulsed through the speakers. Passengers gasped. Pierce's mask cracked. For the first time, fear flickered in his eyes. Lena, voice trembling, said, "Captain, ground control needs an update. Should I call them?" Pierce closed the notebook sharply, clutching it too tightly. He didn't answer, because he couldn't. He turned on his heel, disappearing into the cockpit with the notebook still in hand. The door slammed shut. The cabin fell silent. Amara exhaled shakily, staring at the closed door, the barrier between truth and arrogance. Maya wrapped an arm around her daughter. "You did the right thing, baby." But Amara wasn't thinking about fear or humiliation or Pierce. She was thinking about the aircraft, its heartbeat, its rhythm, its cry for help. And deep down, she knew. This wasn't over, not even close. The cabin felt like it was holding its breath. The turbulence rolled through the plane, rattling cups, vibrating seats, making even seasoned travelers whisper prayers under their breath. Inside the cockpit, muffled voices rose. Captain Randall Pierce and First Officer Mark Teller arguing in harsh whispers that leaked faintly into the aisle. No one could make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. They were not in control. Back in row 27, Amara Cole sat rigid, eyes fixed on the dead cabin screens. The pattern of flicker and fade had stopped for a moment, but that only made the silence feel sharper. Her notebook was still in Pierce's hands. Across from her, Daniel Briggs held his phone up again, recording quietly. Mrs. Evelyn Booker folded her hands, lips trembling as she whispered scripture under her breath. Rafe Moreno steadied a trembling passenger. Lena Hart hovered near row 27, her expression torn between duty and a rising conviction that Amara was right. The cockpit door finally swung open. Captain Pierce stepped out, face flushed, jaw locked, notebook still clutched tight. His shoulders were stiff with the weight of his own denial. First Officer Mark Teller remained in the doorway behind him, looking uneasy, eyes darting from the captain to the dead systems overhead. "Ladies and gentlemen," Pierce announced, voice booming through the cabin, "there is no cause for alarm. We are handling the situation." A ripple of disbelief moved through the passengers. The fear in their eyes said they didn't believe a word. Pierce wasn't addressing the passengers, though. His eyes were locked on Amara. He marched straight down the aisle. Each step echoed like a countdown. When he reached row 27, he held up Amara's notebook with two fingers like it was a piece of trash. "So," he said loudly, "our little airplane expert drew some pictures." Some passengers snickered. Others shifted uncomfortably. Maya Cole tightened her grip on her daughter's shoulder. Captain Pierce, enough, she warned in a trembling voice. She was trying to help. Pierce smiled, a sharp, condescending smile that didn't reach his eyes. Help, he repeated mockingly. Do you have any idea how dangerous it is for passengers to spread misinformation during a flight emergency? Especially children who don't understand what they're looking at? Lena Hart took a step forward. Sir, her notes? Pierce threw her a glare that shut her up instantly. Then he leaned closer to Amara, lowering his voice, but making sure the entire cabin could still hear. You think, because you looked at a few pictures online, you can diagnose my aircraft? You think you're smarter than trained pilots? Amara said nothing, not because she didn't have an answer, but because she already knew what he was about to do. Pierce stood up straighter, turned to the entire cabin like he was on a stage, and announced with theatrical cruelty, All right, everyone, listen up. Phones came out instantly, dozens of lenses pointed toward him. Pierce held up Amara's notebook again, shaking it like a prop. This little girl here, he said, thinks she can explain what's wrong with our systems. Amazing, isn't it? A sarcastic wave of laughter rolled through the cabin. Maya's eyes filled with tears of frustration. Stop humiliating her! But Pierce was just getting started. He planted his feet, puffed his chest, and delivered the line that would echo across the internet hours later. Tell you what, sweetheart, he tapped the notebook with a mocking smirk. If you can fix this aircraft, I'll give you $100 million. The cabin erupted. Gasps, shocked laughter. A few people cheered like it was entertainment. Daniel Briggs zoomed in on Amara's face as the color drained from it. Mrs. Evelyn Booker shook her head in disgust, whispering, Lord, have mercy on this man. Amara sat perfectly still, perfectly quiet, perfectly humiliated. It wasn't the mockery that shattered her. It was the way passengers laughed at her, as if her intelligence was a joke, as if her voice had no place in this world of adults and authority. But even through the humiliation, she couldn't stop noticing the aircraft's behavior, the faint hum underneath her feet, the dimming pulse of the cabin lights, the slight misalignment in the cabin pressure hiss near the vent. It wasn't random, it wasn't new, it wasn't normal, and the captain was ignoring all of it. Pierce stepped back, satisfied with the spectacle he had created. There, he said smugly, now that we've put that nonsense to rest, everyone remain seated while we handle this like trained professionals. He shoved the notebook into Lena's hands without looking at it. Throw that away. Lena didn't move, her jaw clenched. Pierce didn't notice. He had already turned toward the cockpit. But before he could take 2 steps, the aircraft lurched violently to the right. Passengers screamed, overhead bins rattled open, a drink cart rolled downhill until Rafe caught it with his full weight. The cabin lights flickered again, the exact same pattern. Amara whispered under the roar of panic, 1, 1, 1, pause, 2, 1. It's accelerating. Lena looked at the lights, looked at the notebook, looked at Amara, and made a decision. She sprinted toward the cockpit door. Captain, you need to see this! But the door slammed in her face before she reached it. The cabin descended into chaos, and in the middle of the storm, while adults clung to armrests and cried out, a 12-year-old black girl sat quietly, seeing exactly what the captain refused to see. The cabin no longer felt like a passenger space. It felt like a pressure cooker. Every seatbelt buckle clicked. Every whisper carried fear. Every flickering light cast a shadow that made hearts race. The plane shook again, harder this time. A baby wailed 2 rows up. Somewhere toward the middle, someone vomited. The smell of panic hung in the air. In the aisle, Rafe Moreno struggled to maintain the calm facade required of a senior flight attendant. Sweat trickled down his temple as he held the drink cart in place with one knee, and braced himself with both hands. He looked toward the cockpit, where Captain Randall Pierce had locked himself inside with First Officer Mark Teller, refusing to acknowledge the rising crisis or the terrified cabin behind him. Captain, Rafe shouted, banging on the door, we need a full announcement. Anything. No answer. Behind him, people cried, prayed, filmed, or stared into empty screens that no longer worked. Near row 27, Lena Hart stood frozen with Amara's notebook pressed to her chest. Her fingers dug into the cover hard enough to crumple it. She had seen the pattern. She had felt the aircraft dip at the exact moment the warning lights should have stabilized. She had witnessed Amara's quiet certainty far too grounded to be a child's guess. She turned to Amara. Can you explain it to me again?" Lena asked quietly, kneeling beside her seat. Amara nodded, flipping to the page with the loop diagram, her hands steady despite the trembling cabin. "The avionics feedback loop," she began. "It's supposed to reset in a certain order. If it doesn't, the system gets stuck sending and reading incomplete data." Lena followed her finger across the lines, arrows showing logical flow, sequences, conditions. "But what does that mean for us?" Lena whispered. Amara swallowed. "It means the cockpit sees the wrong things. They'll think the issue is somewhere else." Lena felt cold. "You're saying the pilots might be reacting to bad information?" Amara nodded again. "Yes, and if they reset anything else in the wrong sequence, the system can lock up completely." The cabin lights flickered. 1, 1, 1. Pause. 2. 1. Faster this time. Amara tapped her knee in sync. "It's accelerating. That means the feedback loop is getting more unstable." Lena inhaled sharply. "Captain Pierce needs to see this." Amara Cole leaned forward, voice tight. "He won't listen." "He has to," Lena insisted. But her certainty cracked when the aircraft suddenly dropped. A sickening, stomach-wrenching plunge that made passengers scream. Seatbacks rattled. Someone cried out for God. Another shouted, "We're going down!" Rafe grabbed the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain." The speaker cut out mid-sentence. The glitch had spread. Mrs. Evelyn Booker reached across the aisle, taking Daniel Briggs' hand to steady him. "Stay calm," she said, though her voice trembled. "There's still hope." Daniel nodded shakily, but his eyes drifted back to Amara, the only person in the cabin who didn't look confused. Amara stared at the ceiling, her brain pieced together timing, rhythm, electrical paths, the hum under her feet, the delay between warning chirps and flicker pulses. "I need to hear the hydraulic pump," she whispered. Maya blinked. "What, baby?" Amara leaned sideways, placing her ear near the window panel, listening past the roar of wind and turbulence. Lena watched, stunned. "Amara, what are you doing?" Amara pressed her palm to the wall. The hydraulic pump changed pitch about 4 minutes ago. If the avionics loop is glitching, the system is probably feeding the wrong pressure data too. Lena's knees nearly gave out. This wasn't a random smart kid. This was someone who understood the plane more intimately than half the crew. "Okay," Lena said shakily. "I'm taking this to the cockpit. He has to see it now." She rose and started toward the front. But the cockpit door opened before she could reach it. Captain Pierce stepped out, face pale, anger replaced by something darker. Fear. Behind him, First Officer Mark Teller stood stiff, clutching the armrest, clearly aware something was deeply wrong. "Everyone stay seated!" Pierce barked, his voice cracked slightly, something no passenger missed. One man shouted, "Are we in danger?" Another cried, "Tell us what's happening!" Pierce's eyes flicked to the dead screens, to the flickering lights, to his trembling crew. Then his gaze landed on Amara. He marched toward her again. But this time, the cabin didn't laugh. They didn't smirk. They didn't film for entertainment. They watched him with suspicion, judgment, fear. Pierce stopped in the aisle, his voice lower, harsher. "Your little drawings," he hissed. "You got them from somewhere, didn't you? Online forums? Hacker blogs? Did someone tell you what to say?" Amara blinked. "What?" "No. She's a child," Maya snapped. "Leave her alone." Pierce leaned close enough for Amara to feel his breath. "Then explain how you think you know more about my aircraft than I do." Lena stepped between them. Because she does. Silence fell. Rafe looked up from calming a passenger. Daniel Briggs stopped recording, staring. Mrs. Booker whispered, "Bless that child." Mark Teller watched from the cockpit door, expression torn. Pierce glared at Lena. "You are out of line." "No," Lena breathed, trembling. "You are." Pierce's face darkened. Lena held up the notebook. "Captain, what she drew isn't guessing. It's accurate. The loop is failing, and if you don't follow the reset sequence she described, the system could—" The lights flickered again. Fast, erratic, wrong. Amara whispered, "It's entering the cascade phase." Pierce snapped toward her. "The what?" "The point where the system starts shutting down things it shouldn't." Before Pierce could respond, a new alarm chirped, a distorted, corrupted tone. Passengers gasped. Mark Teller called from the cockpit. "Captain, you need to see this. Now!" Pierce hesitated. For the first time, the cabin saw something in his face that wasn't arrogance or pride or cruelty. It was fear. Lena whispered, "Please, look at the notebook. She's not guessing. She's trying to save us." Pierce looked at the notebook, then at the flickering lights, then at the terrified cabin. His hand trembled as he reached tentatively for Amara's notes. The wall of denial began to crack, because deep down, he knew the aircraft better than anything else in his life, and what it was doing right now was impossible to ignore. The truth he had mocked was standing right in front of him, in the form of a 12-year-old black girl holding a pencil and a shaking notebook. Captain Randall Pierce stood frozen in the aisle, one hand hovering above Amara Cole's notebook, as if it were radioactive. The cabin had gone silent, not because the danger was gone, but because everyone could feel the shift. Denial was breaking. Another flicker ran through the ceiling lights, rapid and uneven, almost frantic. 111, pause. 2, 1, again, faster. The plane shook lightly, not a drop, but a tremble, like a warning whispered through metal. First Officer Mark Teller leaned halfway out of the cockpit. "Captain," he called urgently, "we need you." The desperation in Teller's voice cut through whatever was left of Pierce's ego. Pierce finally snatched the notebook from Lena's hands. "Fine," he growled. "Let's end this nonsense right now." He stormed toward the cockpit, but for the first time, passengers didn't part merely out of obedience. They parted with hope. Hope in a 12-year-old girl. The cockpit was a chaos of blinking errors and contradictory warnings, a warning chime repeated in a glitching loop, stuttering like a jammed record. Teller pointed to the primary display. "Look, pressure data is bouncing. It doesn't match the standby indicators, and the flight management system is rejecting part of the last input." Pierce frowned hard. That shouldn't happen unless— He stopped. Unless the avionics loop was misfeeding. Unless the kid was right. He didn't finish the sentence. "Give me the status report," he snapped instead. Teller hesitated. "We don't have one. The system won't stabilize long enough." Pierce's jaw tightened. "Pull up maintenance history." Teller tried. The system glitched again. A red advisory flashed briefly, then vanished. "Captain," Teller said quietly, "we're blind." Pierce's face twitched. Blind. A word no pilot ever wanted to hear. Not during a storm, not mid-flight, not with 200 terrified passengers behind them. His eyes darted to the notebook in his hand. Amara's looping sketches, her tiny handwriting, her arrows showing the exact sequence of the fault cascade. He slammed the notebook onto the console. "Fine," he muttered. "We'll check her story." Pierce grabbed the radio handset, swallowing what was left of his pride. "Denver Center, this is Flight 228. We're experiencing intermittent avionics anomalies. Requesting diagnostic crosscheck." Static dot. Then a voice. "Flight 228. Copy. We see irregular telemetry from your aircraft. Stand by." Teller's eyes widened. "They're getting the glitches too?" Pierce didn't answer. The ground controller came back, voice tense. "Flight 228. We're detecting a repeating fault pattern consistent with a known avionics loop issue on your aircraft's tail number. Teller nearly dropped his pen. His voice cracked. That's the exact issue the girl described. Pierce stiffened. Ground continued. Be advised, Captain. The last maintenance log for your aircraft included a partial reset of bus 3B. If not done in the correct sequence, system instability will escalate. Teller looked at Pierce, horrified. Captain, this matches her notes exactly. Pierce stared at the radio like it had betrayed him. Ground control added, recommend you follow the reset sequence outlined in the Airbus bulletin. Do you require the steps? A long pause. Then Teller said quietly, she already gave them to us. Pierce shot him a glare. But Teller didn't back down. Captain, you saw her diagram. It's the same sequence. Pierce's breath hitched. Just barely. But Teller saw it. This wasn't arrogance anymore. It was fear and truth. Put her on the cabin line, the controller added. Repeat, we need the passenger's assessment. Immediately, Pierce choked. Ground once. The kid? Teller nodded. Captain, we can't ignore this anymore. Lena Hart stood right outside the cockpit, wringing her hands. When Pierce opened the door, she jumped slightly. Captain. Pierce's voice was low, harsh, but no longer dismissive. Bring her here. The entire cabin turned toward row 27. Murmurs rippled down the aisle. Is she really helping? Is she going to the cockpit? That kid might save us. Maya Cole squeezed Amara's hand. Baby, you don't have to. Amara gently shook her head. I do. She unbuckled her seatbelt slowly, carefully. Daniel Briggs filmed her with hands shaking. Mrs. Evelyn Booker whispered, Go on, sweetheart. God walks with the brave. Rafe cleared the aisle for her, and Amara walked. A small 12-year-old girl, notebook clutched in one hand, hoodie sleeves hanging past her wrists. The same girl the captain had mocked. The same girl passengers had laughed at. The same girl who had been invisible. Now everyone watched her like she was the only voice left that could save them. When she reached the cockpit door, Lena placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You've got this, Lena whispered. And for the first time that flight, Captain Randall Pierce stepped aside for her. He actually moved. Inside the cockpit, Amara blinked at the screens, not with fear, but with recognition. She scanned the displays, the warning lights, the blinking inconsistencies. It's the loop, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The sequence is stuck halfway. Teller pointed to her notebook. What's the correct reset order? Amara flipped to the page with the most wear. Here, she said, placing the notebook on the console. Power down bus 3B first, then 1A, then 2C. Only after that, you reset the main avionics hub. Teller matched it to the bulletin on his tablet. His breath caught. It's identical. Every step. He stared at Amara like she was a miracle in human form. Pierce hovered behind them, stiff, fighting every muscle in his body not to protest. Amara added, and you must wait exactly 6 seconds between steps. If you wait less, the system will reject it. If you wait more, the error will multiply. Teller nodded, eyes wide. She's right. That's the timing note. Pierce swallowed hard. For the first time, he didn't have anything to say. Teller prepared his hand over the first switch. Rafe whispered from behind the door. What's happening? Lena responded, voice trembling. She gave them the instructions. Rafe exhaled shakily. God bless that child. Amara took a slow breath. Okay, she whispered. Start now. Teller flipped the first switch. The cockpit fell silent except for the hum of failing systems. Amara counted under her breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Next, click. Amara counted again. Passengers waited in the silent cabin, feeling the tension through the walls. Click. The reset sequence was underway. They weren't safe yet. But for the first time, they were on the right path. Because a 12-year-old black girl who had been mocked, dismissed, and humiliated had just given trained pilots the only lifeline they had left. The moment First Officer Mark Teller flipped the second switch, the cockpit dimmed just a fraction more. The whine of the electronics shifted pitch, a subtle but unnerving drop that made the aircraft feel suddenly more fragile. In the doorframe, Amara Cole held her breath. Behind her, the murmurs of 200 souls seeped under the cockpit door. Fragments of prayers, sobs, trembling voices asking, "Are we okay?" First Officer Teller stared straight ahead, every muscle tight. "Next step in 6 seconds," he repeated, mostly to himself. His fingers hovered over the third switch. Amara nodded, her own pulse thundering in her ears. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, she counted quietly. "Now." Click. The third switch snapped into place. For a moment, nothing happened. The cockpit displays continued to flicker, data streams jumping, warnings overlapping each other, an electronic panic without a clear voice. Then, as if offended by being silenced, the aircraft shuddered, a quick vertical bump that made Amara grab the chair back to keep from falling. From the cabin came a chorus of screams. "Hold it steady!" Pierce barked. Teller's jaw locked. "I am holding it." Captain Randall Pierce stood behind them both, arms stiff, eyes glued to the central console. His uniform was as immaculate as when he'd mocked Amara in the aisle. But his face had changed. The contempt was still there, but layered over it now was something he couldn't disguise. Fear. "This is insane," he muttered. "We're following the instructions of a—" He stopped himself. Of a girl he'd called a charity case 5 minutes ago. Amara didn't flinch. Her voice was small but steady. "You still have one more step," she said. "And the timing is the most important now." Teller glanced at her. "What's the margin of error?" "Less than a second," Amara answered. "If you miss it, the system might lock into a failure mode and you'd have to manually route everything." Teller's throat bobbed. Manual routing mid-flight, in a storm, half-blind. That was the kind of thing pilots whispered about in break rooms and nightmares. He nodded, flexed his fingers over the final switch, and took a slow, shaky breath. "All right," he said quietly. "You call it. I'll move on your count." Behind Amara, in the doorway, Lena Hart pressed a hand over her heart, feeling it pound against her palm. Rafe Moreno peered in from the side, his usually steady eyes wild with a mix of terror and hope. The aircraft rattled again, sidesway this time, like a gust punching its flank. Amara planted her feet, notebook against her chest. She looked at the flickering displays, the glitch pattern still pulsing like a heartbeat slowly losing rhythm. Her mind ran through every article, every manual, every forum thread she'd consumed late into the night, while her mother thought she'd been asleep. She saw lines, numbers, diagrams. She heard the rhythm. She felt the timing. Amara lifted her hand, fingers curled slightly, and began. 1, 2, 3. A bang sounded from somewhere in the cabin. A falling carry-on bag. Someone screamed. 4! A baby cried in a rising wail. 5. Thunder growled outside the windows. 6. Now! Teller flipped the final switch. The cockpit went dead silent for a fraction of a second. Then all hell broke loose. The warning alarms blared, one long, dissonant shriek that made Teller flinch and Pierce curse under his breath. Lights flashed red, orange, yellow, overlapping in a visual panic. From the cabin came a roar of pure terror. "We're going down!" someone shouted. "Oh God! Oh God!" another cried. Maya Cole clutched the armrests so hard her fingers hurt, eyes locked on the ceiling above her daughter's empty seat. Mrs. Evelyn Booker closed her eyes, lips moving in frantic prayer. Daniel Briggs's phone shook as he filmed, the frame jumping between faces twisted in fear and the aisle stretching toward the cockpit door. And then the alarms cut. All at once, the lights stopped flickering. Every warning blink snapped off, like eyes finally closing after a long, sleepless night. In their place, the cockpit was bathed in a calm, steady glow. The primary display stabilized, the conflicting numbers settled, pressure readings aligned, red icons faded back to gray. The aircraft gave one last shudder, then smoothed out. The roar of turbulence softened, becoming a controlled rumble instead of a chaotic pounding. Teller stared at the screens, once, twice, his lips parted. "It's stable," he whispered. "Captain, look at the readouts. Everything's realigned." Pierce leaned in, disbelief etched into every line of his face. He checked each instrument manually, cross-referenced, double-checked. The numbers were clean, the warnings were gone, the avionics loop had reset, exactly as the diagram had promised, exactly as Amara Cole had said. Pierce swallowed, his mouth suddenly dry. He turned slowly toward her. Amara was still standing there, gripping the back of a seat, chest rising and falling quickly. "Did it work?" she asked. Teller exhaled a laugh that was half a sob. "Yes," he said. "Yes, it did. You did it." Lena clapped a hand over her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Rafe let out a shuddering breath, sagging against the doorframe. Behind them, they could hear the cabin's confusion turning into hesitant quiet as the turbulence eased. Pierce's voice came out hoarse. "Ground control. Confirm status." The radio crackled back to life. "Flight 228. We're reading stabilized telemetry from your aircraft. Whatever you did, it worked. Fault pattern is gone. System's normalizing." The controller paused, then added, "Good job up there." Teller looked at Amara. Pierce didn't move for a long second. Then he did something no one had seen him do since the flight began. He stepped aside. He physically moved out of the way, leaving space between himself and the girl he'd mocked in front of the entire plane. "Captain," Teller said quietly, "the cabin needs to hear from you." Pierce hesitated. He looked at the radio, looked at the cabin door, looked at Amara. She watched him, not with triumph, but with a kind of cautious, exhausted hope. He had a choice, to lie or to tell the truth. He picked up the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice more subdued than it had been all flight. "This is Captain Pierce." The cabin hushed instantly. "In the last several minutes, we experienced an avionics feedback loop malfunction that affected the accuracy of our systems." Maya listened, fingers trembling. Mrs. Booker looked up, eyes narrowed. Daniel kept his camera fixed on the ceiling speaker as the voice echoed. "The issue has been resolved," Pierce continued, forcing each word. "Our instruments are stable and we are in controlled flight. We will be diverting to the nearest suitable airport as a precaution." Relieved sobs, shaky laughter, and long exhalations washed over the rows. But Pierce wasn't done. He glanced once more at Amara, then forced himself forward. And he swallowed. The reset sequence was identified by a passenger, a young passenger. Amara's heart skipped. He gripped the mic harder. "A 12-year-old girl in row 27. She brought information to our attention that aligned with ground diagnostics and allowed us to correct the issue." The cabin erupted, not in panic this time, but in a shocked wave of noise. "What? The kid? Oh my God!" Maya covered her mouth, tears spilling freely. Rafe smiled despite himself. Lena laughed once, a disbelieving, emotional sound. Mrs. Evelyn Booker whispered, "That's my girl." Amara's cheeks flushed. She looked at the floor, then at Lena, who beamed at her like a proud older sister. Pierce clicked off the intercom, hand shaking slightly. He didn't apologize, not yet. But the entire plane had heard the most important part. The same captain who had mocked her had just admitted he needed her. When Amara stepped back out of the cockpit, guided by Lena, the reaction was immediate. Applause broke out near the front, then the middle, then the back. Before long, the entire cabin was clapping. Some passengers were standing, craning their necks to see her. Others lifted their phones to capture the moment. Daniel Briggs' recording caught her face as she emerged. Eyes wide, stunned, shoulders curled inward with the unfamiliar weight of so many eyes. Maya rushed into the aisle, pulling her into a fierce hug. "I am so proud of you," Maya whispered into her hair, voice breaking. Amara clung to her, finally letting her own tears fall, relief, fear, humiliation, and vindication pouring out at once. Mrs. Booker reached out and gently squeezed Amara's arm. "You're a blessing, child. Don't you ever let anybody tell you you're less than a miracle." Behind them, Rafe called to the passengers. "Please remain seated. Our hero needs to sit down, too." Laughter rippled through the rows, gentle this time, full of warmth, not mockery. Amara sank back into 27A, buckling her belt. For the first time since the nightmare began, the airplane didn't feel like it was trying to shake her off. It felt calm, like it too was grateful someone had listened. Because while the storm still raged outside and the landing still lay ahead, one truth had already landed. A 12-year-old black girl had just silenced an entire cabin and saved them all, with nothing but a notebook and a mind no one had respected until they had no choice. The storm outside still churned like a living thing, streaks of lightning flashing in the distance. But inside the cabin, the chaos had quieted into a tense, breathless anticipation. The aircraft was no longer shaking. The lights were steady. The warning chimes had gone silent. For the first time in what felt like forever, the passengers believed they might make it. The speakers chimed, this time clearly. "This is Captain Pierce," the voice rumbled, tired and tight. "We've coordinated with air traffic control and will be making an emergency landing at Denver International. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin." Gasps, prayers, and shaky breaths filled the plane. Amara Cole sat in 27A again, buckled tight, hands folded over her notebook. Her cheeks were stained where tears had dried. Her mother, Maya, kept an arm wrapped around her, kissing her forehead again and again as if each kiss could protect her from the world. Across the aisle, Mrs. Evelyn Booker reached over and touched Amara's elbow. "You saved us," she whispered. "Don't ever forget that." Daniel Briggs, still holding his phone, looked at Amara with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "This video, no one is going to believe it," he murmured. Another passenger leaned in, adding, "They'll believe it the second it hits the internet." At the front, Lena Hart and Rafe Moreno rushed through emergency prep procedures, voices steady but eyes still red from the emotional turmoil. Lena kept glancing back at row 27, checking on Amara like a guardian angel who refused to step away. The cabin lights dimmed, the seatbelt signs pinged, the engines shifted pitch as the aircraft descended toward the runway. Tension wrapped around every row. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Pierce announced, "brace positions." Passengers bent forward, heads down. Maya wrapped both arms around her daughter. "Stay low, baby. I'm right here." Amara took a deep breath. The plane vibrated harder as it pushed through the final stretch of turbulence. The runway lights appeared below, glowing dots in the dark, streaking toward them. Then, impact. The landing gear hit the ground with a violent thud. The aircraft bounced once, twice. Screams erupted. Rafe shouted instructions to stay down. Lena held onto the galley counter for balance. The tires screeched. Smoke streaked behind them. Metal groaned. But the plane stayed upright. It roared down the runway, slowing with each agonizing second. Finally, the aircraft rolled to a stop. A collective cry of relief rose from the passengers. Sobs, laughter, shouts, prayers colliding into one overwhelming wave of human gratitude. The storm outside raged on, but inside the cabin, people were alive, and they knew exactly who to thank. Emergency vehicles swarmed toward the aircraft. Fire trucks, ambulances, flashing lights painting the wet tarmac in chaotic color. Captain Pierce stepped out of the cockpit. His face was pale. His shoulders sagged. He looked 20 years older than when the flight began. Passengers stared at him, not with trust, not with admiration, but with the heavy judgment of people who knew the truth. Pierce tried to muster authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," a passenger cut him off loudly. "It wasn't you who saved us." Another voice. "It was the little girl." Another. "You owe her an apology." Pierce stiffened, his jaw clenched, his nostrils flared. Humiliation was a bitter flavor to swallow, and he had to swallow gallons of it. He turned slowly toward Amara. Maya stood instantly, protective as a shield. "What do you want?" she demanded. Pierce hesitated. The entire cabin stared at him. Every phone was pointed in his direction, cameras rolling. He couldn't twist this, couldn't bury it, couldn't control the narrative. Not anymore. He cleared his throat. "Amara?" he said stiffly, her name sounding foreign on his tongue. "You were correct," passengers murmured, some in disbelief, some in satisfaction. Amara blinked. She hadn't expected an apology. She hadn't even wanted one, but she looked him in the eyes. Pierce swallowed hard. "And I should not have spoken to you the way I did." Lena watched him like she was witnessing history. Rafe folded his arms, unimpressed, but relieved. Maya held Amara close. "You humiliated her," she said. "In front of everyone. You laughed at her, and you could have cost lives." Pierce looked away. He had no defense, no excuse. The truth was written on every frightened face in the cabin. When the doors finally opened and the jet bridge rolled into place, it wasn't the captain leading the passengers off. It was Amara. Paramedics and airport safety officers rushed toward the group, but their attention shifted quickly from the standard checks to the unbelievable story unfolding right before them. A firefighter stared. "That the kid?" "That's her," Rafe confirmed, pride in his voice. Lena kept a hand on Amara's shoulder as they walked. Lights flashed, cameras clicked, phones recorded everything. Outside the aircraft, drizzle coated the tarmac, raindrops shining in the emergency lights. Maya held her daughter's hand tight as reporters converged in the terminal. "Is it true a passenger fixed the plane? Who is she? Did the captain really mock her? Ma'am, can we speak to your daughter? Amara, how did you know what to do?" Maya tried to shield Amara from the chaos, but the girl's face, young, tired, overwhelmed, was already going viral on dozens of screens. Daniel Briggs approached her gently, phone still filming. "I posted the video," he whispered. "People are going crazy. They're already calling you the miracle in row 27. Amara's eyes widened. "Oh, wow." Mrs. Booker stepped up beside her, leaning on her cane. "Baby, you better get used to it. You earned every bit of that praise." Pierce exited the aircraft last. No one cheered. No one spoke to him. No one asked for a picture. His dignity slipped off him with each step, until he finally walked alone. By the time Amara and Maya reached the baggage claim, everything had already changed. The airport TV screens were showing raw footage from Daniel's upload. Captain mocks black girl, then she saves the flight. 2-year-old identifies critical avionics failure passengers. Demand accountability after humiliation. Hashtags were trending. People were stitching the video. Engineers were analyzing her diagrams. Pilots were chiming in. Aviation forums were exploding. Amara watched a clip of herself walking to the cockpit replay on 1,000 screens. Her voice cracked. "Mama, is that really me?" Maya kissed her forehead. "That's you, baby. You saved all of us." And as Amara stood there watching the world react, she realized that the humiliation she suffered in row 27 was about to become the turning point of her entire life. Denver International Airport set aside a quiet conference room for Amara and Maya, away from the storm of reporters. But even in this calm space, the buzz of what had happened in the sky felt alive, pulsing through every wall. Maya brushed a curl from her daughter's forehead. "You okay, baby?" she whispered. Amara nodded slowly. She wasn't shaking anymore, just overwhelmed, exhausted, and still trying to believe everything that had happened. I didn't want people to look at me like this," she said softly. "They're not looking at you," Maya replied gently. "They're looking up to you." A soft knock sounded. 3 people entered. 2 airline executives and 1 engineer in a Navy blazer. The tallest of them, Executive Director Helen Graves, stepped forward first. Amara, she began with a warm, steady voice. We owe you more than thanks. What you did today saved lives, including mine. I was supposed to be on this flight, but I changed schedules last minute. Amara blinked, unsure how to respond. The engineer, Dr. Lucas Henley, carried a printout, her hand-drawn diagram now scanned and cleaned up. This, he said, holding it up, is exactly what Airbus engineers published during an internal advisory 18 months ago. The fact that you learned it on your own, that you recognized it in real time, that's something even trained pilots miss. Pierce's face flashed through Amara's mind. His mocking smile, the laughter of passengers, the sting of humiliation. Maya caught the flicker in her daughter's eyes. Dr. Henley went on, the airline wants to offer you something formal, a scholarship track, full tuition to any STEM program you choose, flight training access, and a mentorship position with me, if you'll have it. Amara's mouth fell open. Really? For me? Helen Graves smiled. You earned this more than anyone today. Lena Hart stepped inside next, eyes red, still emotional. Hey, superstar, she whispered. Just wanted to say goodbye, and thank you. You saved my life too. Amara hugged her, and the young flight attendant held her like she was family. Behind her, Mrs. Evelyn Booker poked her head in. Oh, good. The door was open. Honey, I wasn't leaving this airport without giving you one more hug. Laughter broke the heaviness. Amara hugged her too. She felt loved, seen, believed. Helen Graves turned to Maya. Ms. Cole, we'd like to fly you both to our HQ in a few weeks. Our board wants to meet the young mind who caught what professionals missed. Maya's voice cracked with gratitude. That means the world. Truly. The engineer crouched to meet Amara's eyes. You didn't just fix a system today. You changed an industry. People will study what you saw up there. For the first time, Amara allowed herself to smile softly. I just listened, she whispered. The plane was telling the truth. When the world finally heard the full story, when millions watched the video of a captain mocking a black girl in row 27, then watched her save the flight he couldn't, something powerful shifted. People saw what happens when brilliance is dismissed, because it comes in the form of a child, a girl, a black girl sitting in economy with a notebook. Amara's story became more than a viral moment. It became a reminder. Genius has no age. Courage has no seat number. Truth has no uniform. Her dignity rose higher than the aircraft ever could. And for every kid who's been ignored, every voice that was talked over, every mind that was underestimated, Amara showed what happens when you stand firm in what you know, even if no one believes you at first. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of a moment when someone underestimated you, drop a comment below. I am more than they think I am. And don't forget, subscribe to follow for more cinematic, powerful stories of dignity, justice, and rising above.